Hey guys, so I am jumping on today to tell you the birth story of our little girl, third child, Rosie Bell Sullivan. She is now 12 days old. Yep, 12 days old, and she's a little dream. She's amazing. I'm honestly so happy with her. I wanted this baby so much. I so desperately wanted a third child, and I'm just so grateful that she's here now. So I wanted to take the time to do an IGTV to tell you the birth story. And then I've also blogged about it too, and it will be on my blog as well for anyone who prefers to read things. So let's start from the beginning. 4 weeks prior to her birth date, I started to get a lot of contractions, which you will have heard about on my stories when I talk to you about them. So they were either Braxton Hicks or there was some sort of contraction, but to me, they really did feel a lot like pre-labor. At times, they were really intense. I'd get that real period pain in the front and the back pain in the back as well. And I could really feel a lot of similarities between those and the contractions that I got the day before I went into labor with Chloe. So a few times I went to the hospital and got checked out. I learned in other pregnancies by not going to hospital when I had issues that things can go wrong. So I tried to be a real advocate for myself this time and also listen to the beautiful people around me like my midwife and went to the hospital when I didn't feel comfortable with anything. Nothing was ever wrong. They recorded the contractions on there, and I was just told with third pregnancies that Braxton Hicks can be a lot more frequent and that it was a very normal part of being pregnant with my third child. So anyway, fast forward to the day before or 2 days before Rosie was born, and I was getting more intense Braxton Hicks. I also noticed a real shift in my mood. I started to feel like quite annoyed and just grumpy, and I've always been a happy pregnant person, and I even talked to Ryan about I could feel like this pregnancy rage come on for some reason. So I'm not sure if there was a really big hormone shift going on or something like that, but I just felt different in myself. I was also tired, and I, for the first time in the pregnancy, decided to have a nap in the day for those 2 days as well. That was the Monday and the Tuesday. And then on the Tuesday night at about midnight going into Wednesday, I woke up because the Braxton Hicks, which I had experienced for the 4 weeks, were very strong and I couldn't sleep. And this wasn't the first time that it had happened, and not the first time that I timed them either, because I decided to time them. And yeah, I just couldn't get back to sleep. So I was on the app, Contractions app it's called, and I was timing them, and they were all over the place. They were sort of lasting for a minute, but they were 5 minutes apart, 8 minutes apart, 4 minutes apart, 10 minutes apart, that kind of thing. So all over the place. And I led there until about 2 o'clock, and then I went to the bathroom and I noticed that there was blood when I wiped myself. And because with Chloe, I had a placental abruption, this alarmed me. And before this, I had just let Ryan keep sleeping. And I decided that I would wake Ryan up, tell him that I had some blood, and that I would call my midwife. So I called my midwife. I sent her a picture of the blood, which is what I've always done. I'm happy to send pictures so she can see exactly what's going on. And she said that it looked like it was my show and everything was normal, and that with what was going on and what I was telling her, that I would probably be calling her in a few hours' time to go and to the hospital to potentially have the baby. And I didn't realize that Panadol actually can slow down the oxytocin and slow down labor. So not knowing this, and silly me, I didn't ask my midwife. I took a couple of Panadol, I went back to sleep and actually got to sleep. And yeah, and obviously like maybe something would have progressed a little bit quicker, but it didn't, and that's fine. I just had a little bit more rest. And then in the morning when I woke up, I was texting my midwife. She recommended that I get my mother-in-law to come and look after the children. It was her day where she looks after the children anyway. So she just came a little bit earlier and had them. And I was contracting all morning. I was just walking around the house, doing some chores, having breakfast with everybody, that sort of thing. But it was really irregular, and if anything, it had slowed up a lot more. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that the children were home, and they were really wanting of my time, and I couldn't focus on my body and what was happening with my body. So I was quite happy when they left. And it's interesting because I always thought that I would love to have my children around in labor, and that I would get comfort from them. And I did love having them here, but I found that I just stopped progressing. So I think my body just, knew I had other children around that I needed to look after. So it decided that it wouldn't progress any longer in birthing a new baby. So anyway, so at the same time that my mother-in-law picked up the children, Ryan and I decided that we would go for a walk somewhere. So we went for a beautiful walk along the river in Maroochydore, and I was still timing my contractions. Again, they were still quite all over the place, similar timings to what I mentioned before. And it was funny because every other pregnancy I've had, I've gone to hospital because I've had a health issue, whether it's been the placental abruption or the preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. And I said to Ryan jokingly, is this how normal people do labor? Like, you go for the walk, you do your chores at home, or your pre-labor things. So anyway, after we went for a little bit of a walk and the contractions are very much all over the place, we messaged my midwife and we decided that we would go to hospital and just get me checked out and maybe see if there's anything going on. So we were really casual about this. Ryan wanted to stop and get some food, so we got him some food. And I think we ate it in the food court at the hospital. And I said to him, come on, let's go and see what's going on now, because at times I was a little uncomfortable. And we went to see my beautiful midwife who has delivered all 3 of the children. She's amazing. And she said to me that we could do an internal, and she's not, someone who does internals when they're not needed, but I was contracting a lot. I've been contracting for 4 weeks, but again, all over the place. So we really needed to do an internal just to see what was going on. So she said that if I was fully suffused and at least, about 3 centimeters dilated, we could talk about breaking my waters to speed things along. And this mainly being because I had been having these contractions for 4 weeks and I couldn't sleep now very well. We were thinking this could go on for days and I'll be more exhausted. So should we look at breaking my waters? And anyway, so she did the internal and she told me that I was actually 5 or possibly 6 centimeters dilated, which instantly made me cry, because I was like, oh my gosh, like this actually is happening, because I really started to doubt it. At one point in the car, the contractions didn't come for 16 minutes. So I really started to get quite confused and wonder what's happening. And then hearing that I was 5 or 6 centimeters dilated was just amazing to know that I was actually in labor. And we decided that I wanted to get blood tests for my own peace of mind. And I always did this in the labor with Chloe as well, so that I could know that all of my bloods were good from having the pre-eclampsia and HELLP syndrome before. So she said to me, I'm going to go and get everything I need for the blood test. I take your blood, send that off. And then after that, I want a decision on whether you would like to have your waters broken or whether you wanted to just see how you progressed. And midwives are amazing. I'm sure sometimes they have a little bit of psychological things going on, because once I stood up and I walked around the room, I did some lunges, some squats, and put my birth music in, it was almost like, because I had heard that I was 5 or 6 centimeters dilated, I had given myself permission to be in labor. I was in hospital. I felt like I was in my safe space. The children weren't around, and someone had told me, hey, this is happening. So all of a sudden my contractions became more regular, quicker, a little bit longer, and I could really feel myself progressing. So I said to her, I actually don't think I need my waters broken now. And she said, no, I don't think you do either. And Ryan said, we just needed you to, get your head ready for labor, which is exactly what happened. So the mind is an incredible thing. So anyway, the whole labor we sort of decided was 3.5 hours from when I got the internal at hospital. Obviously, it's quite hard to say, because before that, I must have been in labor. Otherwise, how do you get to 5 or 6 centimeters dilated? But I wasn't a textbook labor. I wasn't having regular contractions. So we really couldn't time it from a certain point. So we called it 3.5 hours. I could have been contracting the whole 4 weeks and dilating. So of the 3.5 hours, I would say the first 2 hours, I was very much walking around the room, doing different positions at time, but really just enjoying the music. We got the bath running. We set up candles around the bath. We had all of my birth affirmations on the wall, pictures of the baby's scan, the Hello 3D baby ones. I had a special shell that Ari had given me at the beach a few weeks prior, and when he gave me that shell on Majimba Beach, Chloe and Ari were playing, and I kind of took like a visual picture in my mind of them playing on the beach in our beautiful happy place, and I used that in labor, holding that special rock and just really visualizing the children playing and a really beautiful happy time that we used to have every weekend. So listening to all my different songs, I'll make sure that I put some in the notes of my favorite songs as well. So I was really just so happy just walking around the room. There were 2 points that I cried during the labor. The first time is when I got told I was 5 or 6 centimeters dilated. There was a second time where I was just walking around the room in pre-labor, enjoying the contractions and the waves washing over me. And I just started crying and cuddling Ryan, and the midwife came back in, and I said, don't worry, these are happy tears. I'm crying because I can't believe that this has just happened like normal this time, because every other time I've either had a full induction or I've had my waters broken for me. So I was in such joy that this was just happening of its own account, that I just felt so blessed and that things were progressing. So I was wearing just a bra that could go in the water because I really wanted a water birth, and no knickers. I'm just walking around the room, feeling all the waves, and it was all completely manageable. I was enjoying it, and probably about 2 hours in, I decided that I might like to get in the bath. So I felt like things might progress soon. So I got in the bath. I found that incredibly relaxing. I've always wanted a water birth, but never been able to have one. And just the feel of the warmth all over my body was beautiful. I've always loved the water, always had lots of baths in pregnancy, so it was very familiar to me. I liked lying back in the bath. Sometimes I wanted to be on my knees. And I probably, about an hour before she was born, I had my first sensation and my only sensation of my body pushing itself. And I said, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to push. And I couldn't believe it because everything had been so easy to date and I enjoyed it so much that I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to push and this baby's just going to come out. But it didn't happen like that. That was an hour before the end, and sort of things slowed up a little bit. About 45 minutes to the end was when I actually really started to feel like things became a bit more intense and less manageable than before. Before that was completely manageable and I was really happy with it. But I found I was getting the real pain in my back with each contraction, and the contractions were getting a lot stronger. And because I've birthed before and I've done a lot of calm birth and listened to all my tapes, I recognized that this was transition. And transition meant that very soon I would be meeting my baby. And transition is often very much so the shortest period of the labor, even though it's the most intense. And I recognized this because I started thinking things like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, and maybe I need some pain relief, that kind of thing. I had said at one point to my midwife, oh, I think that I might like some gas. Can we get the gas ready? And she looked at me and said, you don't need gas. And I said, no, I don't need gas. And I've only ever had gas in Ari's labor. I didn't have any drugs in Chloe's labor at all, and only gas in Ari's. So she, because she's been there for all of my births, knows me really well too. And the other thing that I was hanging on to was the fact that we had talked about breaking my waters, and at this point my waters still hadn't broken. And I thought to myself, well, maybe if they break my waters, I'll get through this transition quicker and she'll come. But then also I didn't ever want my waters broken. I wanted no intervention. So I started to say, oh, can we get me out the bath and we'll break my waters. But I knew then I would never get back in the bath if the contractions got stronger, that she probably would come straight away. And I wanted to be in that water nice and comfortable, and for my waters to break naturally. In transition, I'm having these moments where I feel really in control of what I want to do with my body, but also wildly out of control and letting myself just be and feel everything. And that was some advice that I had from my calm birth instructor when I spoke to her about wanting to feel in control. She said to me, why do you need to feel in control? Why don't you just let it all go? So I was really trying to let it all go, and I was making all the crazy noises that you make when you're in labor, the low moanings and that sort of thing that you've never heard yourself make before unless you're in labor. And if you haven't had your baby yet, you'll know what I mean soon. And I was trying different positions. I was putting the hot water on my back when they heated up the bath. And there was a point where I just started to say, I don't think I can do this anymore. I just want her to come soon. We decided at 2:00 that if I didn't have the baby by 2:30, we could talk again about breaking my waters if I wanted to. But for now, I needed to do another half an hour and see how I went. It certainly seemed like the longest transition I've ever had, and I think it actually was. Chloe's was much quicker, and I really felt like I had to work through this transitional time, and my midwife agreed that it is probably the hardest I've had to work in transition before. And as I started to say, look, I don't think I can do this anymore, they suggested I get into different positions to try and help bring the baby down. So I stood up, I was doing figure eights with my pelvis, which is all things that I did when I was in labor with Chloe, but I was in the shower, and just the comfort of the water kept dragging me back in, that I didn't want to be out of the water. I didn't want to be uncomfortable in pain. So as much as I wanted her to come quicker, I also thought to myself, don't rush this. You don't need to stand up and make yourself feel more pain. You can just, let her come when she's ready, be in the water, embrace it. You'll be more comfortable. So I did decide to do that, and I gave myself some breathing time where things really just slowed up. And I don't think I've really ever experienced that before in another labor, where things really did slow for a moment. As I started to sort of lose my headspace a little bit, Ryan looked at me in the eyes. He's such an amazing birth partner. And he said, Nat, you need to get your head back in the game. He said, you've been doing so well. You know exactly what's going on. You're so focused. Don't lose it now. You need to get your head back in the game, and then this will be over sooner and you'll be able to have the baby. So, and Dana was saying the same thing. She was saying, you can do this, Nat. I know you can do this, and just giving me this really beautiful encouragement when I needed it. Because prior to sort of that 45-minute transitional time, which I found tougher, I was very much keeping to myself. I had the headphones in with the music. I was just in my own vibe, doing my thing. Ryan would even offer to help me, and I said, no, I want to keep your assistance for when I actually really need it. I was worried that if he came near me, I would, want him to help me and save me more, because he's more of my home type thing. So I said, no, I'll tell you when I need you. And that's when I needed him. I needed him to get my head sorted and get me out of my own stuff and get me focused on delivering the baby again. And after they both said that, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to get myself, in a good position. I'm going to birth this baby. It'll probably take about another half an hour, but she'll be here soon, and then I can have her in my arms. So I literally went from lying back like this in the water, swaying about, to coming up onto my knees. I can give you a demo. I was up on my knees, and all of a sudden she just came. Her whole head just came out. It was crazy. I literally just changed positions thinking that it would be another half an hour. And I said, oh my gosh, she's coming. And the whole head came out. And what was crazy about that was that during the labor, we had a mirror that I was holding, and I was looking to see if I could see her. And I know in Ari's labor, through the pushing, he would come and go and come and go, and it was a long pushing process. But with this time, it literally went from I could not see a single thing of her to her head out in one contraction. And prior to that, before, I would actually put my finger inside me when I was talking to the midwife to see if I could feel her head. And I could feel her head, but I could feel that she was like a full finger length up there still. But then there was this head, and I was in total shock. I was saying, oh my gosh, get her out, get her out, get her out, because it went from nothing to a head out, and it was burning like crazy, of course, because there was no warm up. and I got told to just do a little push because her chin was stuck. So we got her little chin out. And then with one more push, so it would have been 2, maximum 3 in total. It was just one more big contraction and her whole body came out. And when her body came out, I said, I want to pull her back up to my chest, because I would always imagine having a water birth and that I would be the one to bring her up to my chest. But firstly, it was just so shocking. I had no idea that she was actually going to pop out then. And also, she actually had the cord wrapped around her neck twice, and there was no length for me to be able to get her up. So Dana very quickly said, "No, lift your bum up out the water." And Ryan had to really support my bottom to get it up out the water so that we could get the cord unwrapped from her neck. So Dana actually couldn't even get her up out of the water to unwrap it because there was not enough cord left to get her there. So that's why I had to lift up. And she unwrapped it and then she passed her to me. And she was very quiet. I think she was probably in shock as well because that happened so quickly. So Dana asked me to blow on her face, and it makes me want to cry because it was so beautiful after the initial shock. And she told me to blow on her face, and I blowed on her face, and she just had this almighty lovely cry. And you could tell that everyone was just relieved, like, oh. And with the cord being wrapped around her neck, I should note that I've obviously told afterwards that it doesn't matter if the cord is wrapped around a baby's neck inside. It would have been wrapped around there for quite a while. The only complication sometimes can be, obviously things can happen when they're inside you, but during labour their heart rate can go down. So her heart rate was always monitored anyway, and we always knew that it was perfectly fine. But yeah, so it was just more that issue of we couldn't get her up out the water. But also that is probably why transition took so long as well, because as you can imagine, you've got the placenta and you've got the baby and the cord's attached. So when she was trying to come down, the cord and the placenta would have been pulling her back. And that, we've decided, explains a lot of why I had a prolonged transition where I was really ready to push, but the baby wasn't coming down enough to be able to do that because of the shortness of the cord. And also my waters ended up obviously breaking themselves. They broke as her head came out. And one thing that happened when her head came out was that every other time I've had a baby, there's been quite a little bit of blood. With Ari, I lost 1.5 litres of blood when he came out. And I was asking, is the blood okay? Is the blood in the water okay? Am I okay? Which always made me feel a little bit selfish, because I always felt like the baby comes out and I start to ask if I'm okay, but that's because that's my experience, that the babies have always come out and been fine, but I haven't been. And anyway, there was no water, there's no blood in the water. It was just me thinking of things that had happened in the past. So it's funny how it doesn't matter how hard you work, sometimes that trauma is still there when it happens, you know? Like once she came out and I blowed on her and she was having her little cry, and I was very shocked. We have a video of it actually, and you can see when I sort of snap back into reality and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a baby and she's so beautiful. And after that, Ryan picked me up and put me onto the bed, and I had the injection to birth the placenta, because that's recommended for me. If you've had a large hemorrhage before, it's often recommended that you have the injection. And so I birthed the placenta quite quickly. Everything was intact, lost a little bit of blood, but nowhere near any sort of hemorrhage. And I think a hemorrhage is 500 mils or higher. And then once I birthed the placenta, we got to just enjoy beautiful cuddles with her. My midwife is really big on skin to skin contact straight away, so she didn't get taken off of me to weigh her or anything like that for at least, I think it was 2 hours. And we just cuddled and bonded. Ryan and I cut the cord together. He cut Ari's cord, I cut Chloe's cord. So I said, why don't we cut this one together? This is our final completion of our family, so let's cut the cord and complete it together. And we just took pictures of her and loved on her and cuddled her. She breastfed fairly quickly and she had a nice couple of feeds as well. And then after we got to spend a lot of beautiful time together, it was time to weigh her and give her injections. So she was weighed, and then Ryan got to have a cuddle with her while I had a shower and cleaned myself up. This is the first time I've cried after having a baby. I have normally just been either sort of like sick with Ari, or even Chloe. I was just a bit like shocked because she came quite fast as well. And there was a placental abruption to be concerned about too. But this one, I was just crying that I just couldn't believe that we did it. Like, I couldn't believe, I'll crying again. I couldn't believe that I did it with no complications, no intervention, no one broke my waters, there were no issues. And I just honestly just could not believe that like there was nothing wrong. For me, the end of pregnancy is really stressful, and a lot of people are asking me now, like, how are you doing all the things that you're doing, and saying very kind things. And you know, they've been saying like I've been crying all week when I've had my baby and that sort of thing. And honestly, I'm just like, I used up all of my tears in pregnancy. Like, even though I love being pregnant and I love having the bump and that sort of thing, it's really, really stressful for me from the day I find out I'm pregnant to the day that I give birth to the baby is really hard. Like, it's the hardest time of my life, even though I want the baby so much. And I was just so grateful, and still am, to have her and everything be fine. I remember my first appointment with my midwife saying to her, like, I want this baby. I wanted this baby so much, but now I'm pregnant. I feel like every day is getting closer to a D day, like a labor day where something's going to go wrong. And yeah, I'm just so grateful. And I think that's why I'm just so happy now that it's done. And I'm just, so thankful. I don't think I need to say how many more times I'm grateful. So 4 hours after I had her, we went home, and it was lovely. We had the children looked after that night. I really wanted to have her meet the children that night, and Ryan really pushed me to have his parents have them for the night. So I got a whole 24 hours of just Rosie, and we stayed in a dark room all day. We cuddled, I fed, and it was just amazing. And it was such a great bonding time. I would honestly highly recommend taking some time out. And I'm so glad that Ryan pushed me to do that, as it was so smart. My midwife visited us at home the next day, and it was just so peaceful. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful for Ryan and my midwife and their support and their encouragement when I really needed it, not just in the labor, but the whole pregnancy. Like, I obviously knew why I was having a baby and how much I wanted a baby, but sometimes I had to really ask myself, why did I do this to myself again? Because just that, I'm not normally an anxious person, but that anxiety would get quite strong, and sometimes I felt like I could have a panic attack. And it was just, and I had problems with breathing and that sort of thing, just from the stress. And it's a shame in a way that I had to get stressed, but I needed to be stressed to be alert during the pregnancy. But yeah, I'm just so happy to have her. It was honestly the most beautiful birth. All of my births have been beautiful in their own way. Like Ari, I've always been so proud of myself for getting through such an ordeal and delivering him vaginally and with only the gas. And Chloe's was amazing too. That was in the shower. I actually think that birthing in the shower was really like comfortable and helped me progress really well because of gravity. And then Rosie, I finally got my water birth, and I got my complication free birth, and it was just, it was really, really beautiful, just an incredible moment. So thank you for listening to Rosie's birth story. I am going to put it all in a blog, because I find sometimes with saying things I can waft off a little. So birth stories are hard to tell like this. Your mind goes all over the place. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I would love to answer your questions. I hope it all made sense when I put it all together. And thank you. And thank you to everybody who supported me in the pregnancy too, because I had a lot of support even from you guys at the end too. When people in here knew that I was struggling, and I'd get a lot of messages of encouragement saying, you've got this, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys as well.